Hello, folks. This is your friend Marshal Andy. Welcome to our YouTube program we call Marshal Andy and Friends, the Loudon Sessions. I hope you enjoy our show today, and many thanks for stopping by. Hi, folks. This is Marshal Andy of Loudon Sessions. Of course, we've got an unusual show lined up today. In fact, instead of doing music and just sitting around having a good time and having fun, picking and singing, we're going to do something a little different. I don't know anybody who probably right now at some point in the world is not watching Andy Griffith. They say somebody watches him around the clock every time, every day. Andy Griffith, of course, everybody loves him. And we've got a different show about him today because I know I'm really crazy about it. I always wish that I'd had an opportunity to interview him like I did a lot of the big stars, including Roy Rogers and pretty much all of them. But I just never had the opportunity. But today, I hope you'll learn a little something about the Andy Griffith Show that you thought you already knew, but you didn't really know it. And we've got a great guest. We're just calling them friends for right now. At the end of the show, we're going to continue the show with our good friend Rex. And of course, Rex is going to be joining us a little bit at the end of the show. So we haven't lost any of that. But right now, guys, thanks so much for coming in. You'll just be called Marshal Andy and Friends right now. Introduce yourself.
I'm Wiley Brakebill.
Merritt Brakebill.
Mike Jones.
Mike Jones. Well, thank you so much, guys. Listen, I'm going to ask just a few little questions. There's a great age difference in here right now. You can see that right now. You know, Andy Griffith, one of the reasons that he is so popular, and that show is so popular, is because he kept everything real. And I've heard, I never met the man, I heard him interviewed probably 4 or 5 times, and every single time he always said, I want it to be just like it was in the 40s when I was growing up. He was exactly 3 years older than me. And I grew up in the 30s and 40s. But he grew up purely in the 40s. He said, I want that to be just that way. It's now the 60s when we're doing the show, and I want it to be just like it was then. And he says, folks, if y'all get mad, don't get mad at me. I'm going to correct you if you're doing a saying or colloquialism that isn't the way it was in that day and in that time in Mount Airy, North Carolina. I'm going to correct you. And he and Aunt Bee had a little trouble with that from time to time because she was Broadway trained. Did y'all know that?
Yes.
And she didn't want to talk to too much, you know, about what to do. But anyway, he didn't want anyone to say Aunt Bee. He wanted them to say Aunt Bee because that's where he came from. People in that part of North Carolina and pretty much all over the southeastern part, they would take an A, take it out, put an I in front of it, and then say it. And let's go to dance. Let's dance. We're going to dance all night. Well, I came from South Carolina. We had our own kind of thing. It wasn't that, but it was everything else. You know, we took the R out of everything. Yeah, we never said supper. We said supper, just backwards. And you notice how careful Aunt Bee is when she says, okay, supper, and supper. All right, that's Andy insisted on all of that. Now, how long have you been looking at Andy?
Ever since I can remember. This is my father, and I was raised on the Andy Griffith Show every afternoon. So as long as I can recall, and now I'm doing the same with my children.
Well, I'll tell you what, one of the greatest compliments I've ever had in my life, I have people that do that on my show because they've heard Papa talk about the old Cowboys on Saturday mornings in the shoot 'em up. But if you notice, Andy Griffith every once in a while will say, Opie, what they're playing at the show today is Saturday. Right. He said, are they doing something there or are they doing another shoot 'em up? That's what he called it. Because that's what he did every Saturday. See, remember, that's just 3 years difference between him and me. And my brother and I, 2 years younger than me, I call him my younger brother now, and he's 92. You know, but he and I stayed there all day long until they ran us out to get ready for the night out show coming on that night. So let's talk about y'all just a little bit. What intrigues you so much other than the family tradition of the Andy Griffith Show?
Well, you can't beat the comedy that's in there as well, just the entertainment value. But as I got older, it became the lessons and the characteristics and the morals that were installed upon the show, and just how timeless those are, and how they're really kind of biblical principles peppered all throughout there. And so
well, let me ask you a question this right now, Wiley. This is something that I'm sure you've thought about this. After you went through that stage at different times in your life with your father, all of a sudden you realized almost every one of these shows had a message. And what was the message? That was always told back through Andy and Opie every single time. Father, son. And the times of his disappointment in Opie, when all of a sudden he had the greatest little kid there in the world and just didn't give him a chance. You see, little boys won't have a chance. And it just got to me. Now, give me your outlook on it.
Well, the comedy is not based on one line punchlines.
Mm-hmm.
It's based on the characters and how those characters were developed. So the writing, exceptional writing, but they took that writing and formed it into their character. They didn't have to have a funny line for it to be funny.
Because they were.
Because they were fun. They made themselves believable as that character.
And you could not have gotten a better cast to cast it if you went around America 10 times.
For even the minor characters that are in there were perfect.
One thing I like to see, we were talking about this before we went on and got on the internet here, but sometimes you'd end up, Andy had a way of, he wanted to bring some of these actors that were still around. They were still in good enough health, but they didn't act much anymore, and they needed to work. But they still could remember lines. Not only that, but the studios could shoot the show a lot cheaper because these guys knew their lines. You didn't have to practice them all day and then keep shooting the same thing over and over. So what they did, Andy saw an opportunity there to bring back someone. One of the first ones was Andy Clyde, old California, with Hopalong Cassidy's sidekick. Everybody remembers him and Lucky and that bunch when we were all going. People our age, of course. Ain't nobody owes me, but somebody did. But the thing that brought that back, Andy gave them a chance to continue their profession, see. And I hear people asking questions all the time and say, well, why Andy was so picky about that? Because just what he said, he wanted it to be the same way it was when he was living in that town at that time, and that's why it's real. And that's what makes it, that's why every family that wouldn't want to pattern their family after that kind of action and performances week to week would be someone who's just looking for the wrong way to go, because they really had it right. And Opie, what a child actor. Drew, my son, and I were talking just the other day. I don't believe, and I've seen them all from Out Gang Comedy, The Little Rascals, all the kids, I don't believe there's a better child actor that ever played anything. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you something else too about acting. Andy Griffith was, in my opinion, and this is folks out there, all of y'all that are watching, I hope you hear somebody. I just want to tell you right now, I could be dead wrong on this. This is strictly my opinion. Andy Griffith was one of the best natural actors that's ever lived in any part that's ever been written. The Face in the Crowd. You remember that?
Yes, very good movie.
You can't get more dramatic than that. Face in the Crowd. All right. The things that he did up around over in North Carolina and Virginia on the beaches there when they would play these plays, the college kids, well, you know, he was at the University of North Carolina. You knew he went there.
Yes.
Well, while he was there, every summer he was in those plays. And he was Sir Walter Raleigh and all the things he played. And he really, all that time, was developing something he didn't even know he was going to end up doing. You know, I can tell you something, I don't believe anybody can answer this question. Do you know what Andy Griffith, and I heard him say this, like I said, I never met him. I heard it in an interview. I heard him say, guess what he wanted to be in a Wales singer?
I think I can tell you.
All right.
I've heard this before. He went to his advisor at the University of North Carolina, from what I've read, and asked if they had a ministry program because he wanted to be a pastor.
That's right.
And they said, no, we don't have one. So he stuck with music and ended up getting a music degree.
He sure did.
Yes.
Yeah, actually, he had such a tripod kind of degrees that he had, because when he finished and came out of there, he could do anything from acting to teaching English literature. And then him right after that, he came out with these special records about, they call it football, and the one about the classics that he did with all of those,
Romeo and Juliet.
Romeo and Juliet. Well, I'm right here. And he was, and I started studying him. Well, I had the pleasure of introducing Patricia Neal, about a year before she died. And Patricia, I happened to be in the hospital over there with this first back operation I had, and she found out I was over there. I didn't even know she knew who I was. And she came by to visit me, and I said, would you do an interview? Well, they lined it up where I could do the interview at the hospital. And when I did the interview, I said, what do you think about, she was a leading lady, in A Face in the Crowd. You knew that.
Yes.
Yes.
And I said, what did you think about Andy as an actor? She says, he had more raw talent than anybody I'd ever worked with. And she was a big Gary Cooper fan and all the stars of the day, played with all of them. But Patricia Neal said that about him. I started paying a lot of attention to his acting ability, just like you and I are talking.
Yes.
Now, he's sitting about, but what's he doing at that time? Is he just looking around and seeing, he created something to do even when he wasn't supposed to do anything. He was a great, great actor. And I just had so many people to tell me that they started paying attention to those kind of things when they found out that Marshal Andy was a big, big fan, and I have been. But one other reason I'm such a big fan, he not only tells the truth and makes it real, but I came from the same stock, the same town, not the same little town, but the same size of 5,000 people in the city, 10,000 in the county, and I grew up exactly. I knew what he was going to say next. Almost. I grew up just like Andy Griffith did. And I would have given anything to this day if I could have ever gotten to meet him, just meet him, not only introduce him. Someone asked me the other day, said, what happened to his wives? Do y'all know? Any of you know anything about his wives? I'm asking a question.
I know very little.
Just that he was divorced from his first wife, and of course he married Helen
later on.
Yeah.
But during the time he was married again. He was married again in between there.
Yes.
He had a second wife.
You're talking real life.
Yeah. Real
Yes.
life.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yes. So you're married three
Real
times.
life, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. But yes, he had his first wife, either they divorced or she died. I'm not sure about that. The second wife he was married to during the show, the actual show was going on. And of course she was with him. I understand that she was with him over in North Carolina down when where he ended up retiring on his big island that he had down there, Suffolk Island. But I understand that she was still living and with him during that time. I don't know about his second.
She was actually in the show from time to time, like as an extra.
Yeah.
And the one particular where they're in the choir, and Barney is Andy's trying to get him to lower his voice.
Well, yeah.
She's in the background there watching the whole thing.
Like when he would come up and say, and I've done this with Sammy Sawyer here, and with David West, I've done this with him, and who's also a Barney, he's a Barney guy, and he would say, no, that's still too loud. And he said, no, you got it right. Finally, he says, that's it, that's perfect, that's just what I want. Now, let's move over to you, Mike.
I think his first wife's name was Barbara Edwards, if I'm not mistaken.
Could
and
be.
they mentioned her in one episode because he said, I chased a little girl around in 5th grade named Barbara Edwards.
Yeah.
I think that's right. Yes.
Well, I'll ask Charlie Pride died not too long ago, and I'm fortunate enough right now that my keyboard player is Danny Hutchins, Charlie's player. He plays for me now. By the way, I'm going to have a big show on July 25th in the old city, so I'll keep you advised on that. And anyway, it so happened that we were talking about that, and he knows every one of those girls, where they came on the show, what their real names were, and where the stage names were. All of it about each one came on, like Joanna Moore, you know, who was on that show there just the other night. She was a nurse in the hospital. The second one, Mary, was the first one, if you remember. And I don't remember her real name, but how many people know what was Aunt B's last name?
Bobby A.
No, Aunt B.
Oh, on the show?
On the show.
They always said Taylor. Aunt B. Taylor.
That was it. Beatrice Taylor. That's it. A lot of people ask me that question. I'll stop and think.
It's not a trick question.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
You got to think about that. Yeah, that was her husband's brother's wife. I guess it was a brother-in-law, I think. You know, it wasn't the real blood family, if I understand. Now tell me about you and how this all got started.
Probably when I was a little kid, and the comedy brings you into it first. But the older you get, the more life lessons you learn that the Andy Griffith Show produces. Like you was talking earlier, every show is a life lesson.
Isn't that the truth?
Yes, I have a 35-year-old daughter, and she said, I don't understand why you watch the Andy Griffith Show all day.
Really?
Well, she got to watching it. After about 5 or 6 episodes, she said, you know, I really see why you watch this. She said, there is a valuable life lesson in every show. And she said, I can see why you like it.
And nobody could play it better than Andy. And Andy, if you remember it, he was taking up for Barney, always trying to make him look good. But when Barney first came, they were supposed to be cousins. And he was going to be the straight man. They switched it around, you remember? And Andy ended up saying, wait a minute. He's funnier than I am, you know, because Andy by that time had made his, his record as a comedian. So that's what he was supposed to be. But tell me some more about your experience with it.
Just love the show. Grew up, you know, like I said, watching it my whole life, and it turned into where the more you watch it, the more you get into different things at the Andy Griffith Show. You know, I'm a member of the Mayberry chapter of the Rerun Watchers Club. We meet ever so often and get together and talk about Andy Griffith and have fellowship. And
all right.
And then a group of us, we go to Mount Airy, North Carolina every year.
Once a year for the reunion.
For the reunion.
Yeah. They have a section of town over there, Fred, that plays and sings on my show, Fred Lomar. You can go, instead of staying in the hotel, you can go stay in Andy's house, stay in his room. And Fred did that because he was just like all of us. It's something about the Westerns, my show, and Marshal Andy that ties itself together. Because the good guys won.
Right.
That's basically what it would be. Now, I think we're getting pretty close down to the end of this time here, but the one thing that I was trying to find out from time to time, I'll ask different questions about different people, and I just want you to do me. This is your assignment, Mike.
Yep.
He keeps talking about the Grand Theater right there. You know, we had a Strand in my hometown in South Carolina, had a Strand and the Palace. The same man owned them both, and I got a job working for him so I could get in the movies free. And you know what a buff I am on movies.
Right.
Well, everything that ever happened to me in my life took place on Front Street within 1 block, a half theater apart. Next door to the Palace was the Walgreens drugstore. And that's where we went every Saturday morning after the football game, if we won. If we lost, we didn't come back out. I couldn't wait when we won, especially if I did something good. You know, I'd be on there by 6 o'clock in the morning walking the streets. But anyway, one thing I want you to do for me, if you could, find out through your connections, you've got them, what the name of the theater is in Mount Airy, North Carolina. Was it the Grand, like they showed it?
No, the name of it's the Earl.
The
Earl, E-A-R-L-E, the Earl.
Is that right?
And it's still there, and they have shows there during Mayberry days. Certain musicians come in, the dealers come in.
This time with my show,
Yeah.
it all ties right back in with what I'm trying to do, and I didn't even know what I was doing. It all ties together.
Yes.
Well, someone asked me here just y'all, of course, you know the great family here that lives in town. Ham, you all know Ham, you know, down
Carey,
and Carey, the Carey family, and Bo and all them. And his brother, Sam, I guess it was over here, we were playing here one day, and he says, how did you get all this going? And I said, you know, I didn't really work that hard at it. I didn't really do that much. Everything just sort of fell in place, from the Palace Theater and the Strand Theater, and things that I wanted to do. I said, I've done exactly. He said, no, it had to be more than that. I said, no. One thing opened up in television, another opened up in radio, and all of a sudden I go to work for Ted Turner's father, who would ever dream of that. Well, I went there right out of college. But that led to something else, and then when the television came along, I didn't have anything to do with any of it. And all of a sudden, I knew what I wanted to do, so I found a place to put me into that mix, if you understand what I'm saying. And that's kind of like where Marshal Andy came from. I just want to thank you guys for coming, and I appreciate the fact that you're not only good and faithful viewers of the Andy Griffith Show, that I hope you watch my show occasionally. And I just want you to know that the kind of thing that we're doing now, we're losing. And I want to see people get back to those valuable days. And I don't mean to have a war to do it like it was during World War II when I was growing up, and then the Depression, which just preceded that. I don't want it to be so hard. I just want people to get along and bring back those values and see where we were and see if we can't get back there again. Thanks again. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Well, what can I say? One more thing. I went on a cable assignment over, and I was in the cable business, to Mount Airy. I didn't even know we owned cable. They sent me over there for a dispute they had with the city council because we were on a contract basis with them. And I asked, how could I get from here to the building where I was meeting? The guy says, go down the street, make a right. When you get to that corner down there, turn right. And I got to the corner, and it said Taylor. Taylor, the main street was Taylor. Had to have something to do with Andy picking that name Taylor. He might have been one of the towns and people that started the city. He could have been some hierarchy somewhere along the line. That's a big name in that part of the country. They named that street, and I would say that. So you might want to check that out too.
Okay, I'll do that.
Thanks so much, guys.
Excuse me, Andy,
I had a great time.
Can I interject for just one second? To each of our guests today, I'd like to ask a question. What is your favorite episode of the Andy Griffith Show, and why?
Can they hear you? Can they hear you?
Yeah. Go ahead, Walt.
Yeah, so it's hard. Of course, it's hard to pick a favorite. Hard to pick one that's.
I was going to ask you that, by the way.
But if I had to choose one, I'd probably go Mr. McBeevy.
Yeah, I know
I
that.
love.
Andy shaking
That's
that
great,
hand at the
man.
end. I'm so glad to meet you.
Oh, yeah.
I use that often in many different aspects, and in Sunday schools, it's just such a important principle of faith and having faith.
And it keeps popping up in that show.
Yes.
It keeps popping up because there were others where Opie, Andy thought he was spending all the money out of the piggy bank, and he was just trying to go get the money back that he'd already spent because he was going to get Mr. Greeton his money back. The old man that lost the $50 when he
Yes.
$50.
Parnell, that's it.
You know, and anyway, what's yours?
Man in a Hurry. And where
Yeah,
the
preach
man's
against that
traveling
gospel.
through and his car breaks down and he's in a hurry, urgently, emergently to get it fixed. And it's on a Sunday, so nothing's open. And it's, you're pitting this city, urban man coming through and the small rural that which just stops. And
Except for 3 old ladies on
it's
the
on the phone, that's right.
Remember, right.
Well, their feet fall
Men were orbiting the moon, and here 2 old women feet fall asleep.
People don't realize what's going on here. This is the 21st century, or 20th century, I guess was that. what are you thinking about?
And I wonder what causes that. They, you know, they just don't get excited about anything. It's Sunday, and it's our day of rest.
Well, you know, one of the lines and one of the things that I like came out of that show from this same actor, I forget his name, James Salmon, I believe his name, but he's a real actor. He's played all kind of serious stuff. But he's fidgeting and Andy's over there trying to peel an apple without, you know, breaking the peel off.
Yep.
But the things that he would say and do during that time made so much sense about the way their life was. And then when the preacher comes back through there, you know, to get them all in there, and they just finished nothing work, you know, the music stand broke down, and they were going to go back to that way of life and playing in the park again. You remember all that?
Yes.
None of that came about, but it showed the difference in the two different lives
Lifestyles.
that people led back during that time, and somehow or another we lost the way.
Yeah.
And we've lost it, but the others in those towns. And that's why people love Andy Griffith. And the casting, again, people like Thelma Lou, how in the world could you pick out anybody to play a part any better? Or Aunt Bee. It was just, everybody had an Aunt Bee. I think I had 2 or 3 of them like that. Fried chickens wouldn't let you leave the house without a damn sack.
Back full sandwiches.
You see, it was so real. I don't know any one show that's ever affected this many people.
And there's so many quotes that come out of the show that we use on one another, and
Nobody else gets it.
We
get
get it.
it.
Yes.
But we knew where it came from, and they didn't.
Yeah.
That's
And
it.
but then they'll give us the next line back
Yeah, they know right away.
right away.
Yeah,
But
that's
Marshall, I did just want to say what these two were talking about, the life lessons. I've always called it life applications. There's not one show in there that you cannot apply to life today.
Everyday life. Yeah.
Everyday life.
That's true.
Everyone you
that,
can.
Well
to me,
put. Yeah, that's well put. There was one, what was yours?
Yeah, I was gonna say, what's Mike's
My
favorite
favorite
show?
episode is Goober and the Art of Love. When they try to teach Goober how to date.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it's hard for me to believe somebody 30-something-year-old never been on a date.
Peeping through the
Yeah.
window.
there are people like that.
Yeah.
That's what's so real.
Yeah.
Peeping through the window.
Yeah, when Barney and Goober are peeking through that window, I've watched that episode 1,000,000 times and I laughed just as hard now as I did the first time I ever seen it.
Well, I'll tell you mine if y'all want to
Yes.
know.
Yes, sir.
Opie and those little birds.
Oh, yeah.
Blinking and nodding.
Well, you're thinking, no, that's it.
Yes.
There's so many stories in that, we can't name them all. God
Yeah.
knows, the feeling that he had for those birds and the hurt that he had when he came home to realize that just what his daddy told him not to do, shoot that slingshot.
Yes.
Of course, the time before that, one of the funniest slingshots was Barney shooting one through the mirror backwards.
Behind bars.
Folks, thanks so much
Hey,
for coming.
Hold on one second. Dan, I got one, before we end the show.
Here we get
Yeah, well, I might be putting them on the spot, but I think they're so into it and they're so authentic about this. And I think they can come up with an answer. I'm curious, and I want your folks and your fans to hear this too. Of all 3 of y'all, again, just like when you were asking your favorite episode, it just hit me. What's your favorite small time guest that came on the show that was a bit, did a little bit part that wasn't the main cast, but like, each one of y'all, I'm sure you might have one that kind of stands out. I'm just curious, and like a guest star that came on,
I would think for kind of entertainment value and the musical aspect of it, you gotta love Jim Lindsay.
Yeah,
I
we just
love-
talked about him
I love the
earlier.
musical.
I'm sure
He's
we're
met him in
glad that
person.
We've got him,
Yeah.
with me and him together.
That was 2 great episodes with the guitar and him coming to town and playing it, trying to build himself
And then
up.
coming
Yeah.
back, showing
Great.
him coming back after he,
Yeah.
left the band and then having to come back humiliated.
Yeah, he got the big head too much. But that was yours
There was a lesson there
anyway.
too.
Yeah.
Yes.
There was a lesson there too. But that was one of them. But those little birds got me. But I don't think there's anything that ever was in an Andy Griffith show that the way they handled it that I didn't like. I said, well, sometimes you go to a movie or television or something, you can see, they'll say, I wouldn't have said that, or I wouldn't have put that in there. Nobody can say that about an Andy Griffith show. Now, why do you think that was stuck to all the way throughout the whole thing? I started this show out today talking about it. You remember? Because Andy insisted on they do it
Oh,
just
yes.
the way that it was done when he was growing up. I was showing, before we got on the internet here a little while ago, Rex
Yes.
with the guitar. I was showing him. When I was a young boy coming along, I had one, there were several of us children. Some of them didn't make it during those years, got sick, and then a lot of them died back then. I was the 11th child. I had one brother that's still living, that's younger than me. But there was something about the way that things went about, the children, and the way people did things. And every time I see something in Andy Griffith Show, my brother Tommy had already done that same thing. Exactly that way.
10 years
And
old.
that's because Andy had the same thing going on in his town at the same time. Well, I was showing
And
Rex
brother, too.
how Andy plays the guitar, and I got to thinking, Tommy, my brother, was sitting on the front porch on Sunday afternoon when they singing the song to this girlfriend that I don't know where he had her, he was trying to get her, but I know he was working at it pretty good. and he was playing the guitar, and it was, Have You Ever Been Lonely? You remember that song? Have you ever been lonely? Have you ever been blue? Have you ever loved someone the way I love you? He was laying it on, man. He was putting it to it. But he was playing the guitar, was something that Rex picks out. He was hitting one E string, the top string open, and taking these three fingers coming down. And he said, well, you know, Andy, Chet Atkins says there's only one way to play a guitar, and it's with the three fingers going down. So I was doing that. My brother Tommy did a guitar the same way. And I go and look at Andy Griffith. Andy's playing with the Darlings, who, by the way, you know, they played the Darlings on the show, but they were really from down in Georgia. What were they?
Dillons.
They were
Dillons.
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 Yeah. What another great group of
Yes.
people. One of them still living.
Rodney.
Rodney's still
He-
going.
Good guitar
Does he go-
player.
He comes to my area every year.
Well, you watch him play the guitar, they'll all hit with those three fingers down. But anyway, thanks a lot.
No, we didn't get on the other two on the. What's your favorite? I'm curious to
You had
see.
three?
Yeah, they all three will answer their favorite, like one of the favorites or the favorite guest star that came on and made a special appearance on the Andy Griffith. I'm just curious.
Okay, well, I will just say, following up on him from the music aspect and what you just said, anytime the Darlings were on,
Yeah, I love that.
yes, I love those episodes, and especially when Ernest T was put in the middle of it. That amped things up a little bit for him. And Briscoe Darling, now you were singing a great love song right there, but Briscoe Darling really performs the ultimate love song to Aunt B when he sings Low and Lonely. Out from the window.
Low and lonely, sad and blue. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Yes,
That's it.
Yeah. He says, I noticed you taking a liking to me, you know, when she was serving him all that.
Specializing on it.
Yeah.
What about the boys?
Yeah.
How about you, Mike? At the end of the show, what's one of your favorites or your favorite
it
guest star? Maybe it sticks out in your mind. It was really real funny. I know they're all funny, but your
We'll
favorite.
come back to Goober and Our Love. The two episodes that Lydia Crosswaith was in, her being so dry and everything. Look, you want to go to the movies? Done seen it. You know,
Oh yeah, love that.
I can't ride in the car. I get car sick.
Or my bad back can't go both. It was just
Or,
everything.
I've done eat that box of chocolates. Can we just walk to the dance? You know, that, to me, she's the best character.
They were
Yeah.
laying heavy on her stomach.
Yeah.
Those are the lines of the things that you picked.
The epitome of monotone.
I like
It's
one time
it's
she
awesome.
came in there and they asked me something that said, Lydia, that's, and Barney said, that's from Greece or wherever it was supposed to be from. And she looked at Andy, and Andy's, looking at her like he wanted him. Says, well, it's not really. And he says, I'm really from Greensboro.
And she also played Juanita Pike.
Yeah.
Juanita Pike.
Hey, I do have to say this too real quick.
Sure.
We can't not mention the Fun Girls.
Yeah, my mother loved them.
Yeah.
My mother loved them to get that. That was one of
a
the
little over 5 years. She couldn't wait. She'd see them over and over and over when the Fun Girls came on, especially when she'd say, "Hey, dog." You know, my wife would do that just like
Hey, dog.
And anyway, thanks again for coming,
Yes,
guys.
sir.
Reliving a very favorite time of our lives back then and now, and I hope it continues.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Remember this,
Yes, sir.
if you don't wear a white hat, please wear a smile so we can tell you from the bad guy.
Thank you for joining us today, ladies and gentlemen, for episode 19 of Marshal, Andy, and Friends Loudon Sessions. Andy, we had a good discussion on there, didn't we?
Great one, man. What a great.
Had some good guests, really knowledgeable. Yeah.
Yeah, we're real knowledgeable, and not only that, but they were really into it.
Yeah.
And each one of them gets and still gets, every time he sees one of those shows, gets a message, and that's the real thing about Andy Griffith. Yes, I really enjoyed doing that.
They've probably seen each episode 50 times.
Well, you know something, we talked about this a lot, and Andy did some picking himself on the show. Let's do one of Andy's old songs. Aunt Bee will be on the front porch with Opie, and they've had the churned ice cream, and maybe Barney's gone home by now, and they just said, well, you know, let's just play a song.
How about Going Down the Road Feeling Bad?
Oh, I think he does that a lot.
That'd be a good one, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that came out about 1934.
Is that when it was? Do you know what episode and all that?
No, I'm talking about the song.
That's what I'm saying. On the.
No, I don't know what
Oh,
episode of the song, no, but it's on there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. All right, ready to go?
Well, I'm going down the road feeling bad, Lord. Going down the road feeling bad. Going down the road feeling bad, Lord, Lord. And I ain't gonna be treated this way. Well, they feed me on cornbread and peas, Lord. They feed me on cornbread and peas. Feed me on cornbread and peas, Lord, Lord. And I ain't gonna be treated this way. Well, down on the jail in my knees, Lord, I'm down in the jail on my knees. Down in the jail on my knees, Lord, Lord, and I ain't gonna be treated that way. Well, I'm working for the man every day, Lord, yes, I'm working for the man every day. Working for the man every day, Lord, Lord, and I ain't gonna be treated that way. And I ain't gonna be treated this way. Thank you for joining us, ladies and gentlemen, for episode number 19 of Marshal, Andy, and Friends, the Loudon Sessions. Please join us again in 1 month when we have episode 20. And until then,
If you don't wear a white hat, please wear a smile so we can tell you from the bad guy.